Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. We just give it a few more minutes. We're expecting a few more people to join. So we start in another maybe 5 to 10 minutes. We just have quite a number of people registered and they haven't come in yet. Thank you. Good afternoon again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar on this Friday. Okay, so for today's topic, we are focusing on this NII Security Controls from policy to implementation. So my name is Ibrahim from Condition Zebra. I'm actually going to be the host, presenter for today, right? So talking about today's topic, right? This is focusing purely on more of a compliance and risk-based focus in terms of cybersecurity, because regularly we do this webinars and we always talk about the technical portions, right? But it's also important to look at the compliance and the regulations, right? That's why we actually organized today's session. So before we go into the deep dive of the session for today, I would like to wish everyone Selamat Hari Raya, and also happy holidays to those that are actually not celebrating Hari Raya. Right. So just some housekeeping rules before we go into the coverage for today. So some of you might be wondering, how do you ask questions, right? If you have any questions, please feel free to drop it on the chat box. We will actually have a Q&A session separately at the end of the webinar. Right. And then some of you might be thinking, is this session being recorded, or is there going to be recording or slide available? Yes. If you would like to have a recording copy or the copy of the slides, please reach out to us via email or phone call or WhatsApp. We will be happy to provide that to you as well. There is going to be additional support after the webinar. So basically, whatever you learn today from this session or the takeaways, we are actually happy to support you further after this if you need any additional consultation or would like to know more about all these things. All right. So for agenda today, we just let you know a bit about Condition Zebra. What is Condition Zebra? What we do? What kind of services that we can offer you? And of course, we will talk about the introduction of NCII itself, the Cybersecurity Act 2024. And then we'll do a deep dive into NCII, the requirement, then the mapping of the obligation to security controls, then compliance to meet your requirement, then delivering the audit readiness, right? And we do have a free assessment at the end of the webinar. For those that stay to the end, you can actually entitle for a free assessment or free consultation, whereby we can actually sit with you to understand more on your gaps and how we can help you to close those gaps to meet up to the regulatory requirements. All right, so some of you might already know about Condition Zebra. Maybe you have heard about us for a few years or things like that. But Condition Zebra, we are purely a cybersecurity company. We are based in Malaysia, right, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And basically, we have been in this industry now for about 21 years. We have completed more than 1,000 cybersecurity assessment projects, and we have trained more than 10,000 professionals in terms of IT security. Of course, we are licensed. We also have all the necessary regulatory requirements as well. So we are accredited by CRES to basically provide penetration testing services. We are licensed by NACSA in Malaysia and also by CSRO and also by ISMS. We actually have ISO certification as well. And we have won this award as a cybersecurity education and training provider of the year, right? And we are also a HRDF approved training provider, right? So at a very high level, what we do in Condition Zebra is security assessment, right? Forensic investigations, managed security services, and also IT security training, all right? So in more detail, here's actually a list of our services and offering, all right? So we focus a lot on security assessment, like penetration testing. We do have IT security trainings for technical teams, right? Whether physical or online classes. We have cybersecurity awareness for the general staff or the non-IT people, or for the entire organization. And we have also quite a bit of expertise in terms of managed security services as well, right? Whereby we can help you to manage your endpoints or firewalls or devices, and we basically can offer you EDR, XDR, and also MDR solutions as well. Okay, so talking about overview of Malaysia's core cybersecurity regulations, right? This is one area that a lot of us might be thinking, okay, Malaysia, do we have any cybersecurity laws or is there any regulation, right? Is Malaysia actually on till that level of implementation of cybersecurity laws, right? For those that are on the know, they will know definitely yes. There are quite a number of guidelines or policies or regulations in cybersecurity for Malaysia, right? The most prominent one right now is Cybersecurity Act 2024, right, which was enacted in 2024. It came into focus, I think, on August 2024, right? We do have a PDPA, which has been with us for many years, initially implemented in 2010, and there was a recent amendment or update in 2024. right? For those in financial institutions or financial sector, you most likely will know about RMIT, Bank Negara, risk management in technology. Then for those that are players in the capital markets or stockbrokers or securities industry, you basically will be focusing on cybersecurity guidelines from Security Commission. So Security Commission or SC, they also have what they call GTRM, right? Which is a guideline in technology risk management, right? And of course, ISO 27001 or ISMS, which is basically the global standard in terms of security management, right? IT security management, right? So these are the common or more prominent ones within Malaysia. So in more detail, we can give you an overview at this level, right? So we do have PDPA, as I mentioned earlier, which is from 2010. So recently upgraded or amended to be updated. So it actually focuses on data protection, right? So talking about how to secure your data, how to process the data securely, and notification in case there is any cyber breach, right? There is a very old one also, CMA. Maybe most of people might not be aware of it, the Communications and Multimedia Act, right? I think this one is all the way from 80s or 90s, right? But recently it has also been amended, right? And actually the new amendment is effective from February 2025, right? So this regulation or this law focuses more on the communications sector, right? And also recently, the amendment focuses on social media as well, whereby there's new policies that have been implemented to enforce, right, registration or licensing of certain social media organization within Malaysia, right? Also, of course, managing the network integrity and also the content security, right? So a lot of the new generation social medias, like for example, TikTok and all that. So these are actually all regulated under CMA. All right, as I mentioned, the more prominent one is Cybersecurity Act 2024, right? And this basically focuses on the entire country, right? Focus on national cybersecurity, right? Which is going to be focusing on our topic for today, right? So this focuses on risk assessment, incident reporting, all right? Of course, risk assessment is very wide, okay? And also incident reporting, we'll talk about it in the coming slides. Then, of course, the very prominent one that has been with us globally is ISO 27001, or what they call ISMS, right? Information Security Management, right? So this focuses on implementation of information security within an organization, right? Of course, risk assessment and continuous improvement, right? So this is also a very prominent one, especially within Malaysian context. Bank Negara RMIT is purely focused on banks and financial institutions, but it focuses on access control, incident response, third-party risk management. And as mentioned earlier, the GTRM by Security Commission focuses on regulatory framework for management of technology within the capital market. Right. So depending on whatever sector that your organization is participating in, you can actually realize that some of it might apply to you, some of it might not apply to you, but the overall one, I would say PDPA and also Cybersecurity Act 2024. These two applies to almost every organization in Malaysia. So we do a further focus on this Cybersecurity Act 2024, right? Just a quick vote here. Who here have heard about this Cybersecurity Act 2024? You can just indicate in the chat box. You just mention yes in the chat box. Okay. So quite a number of people actually heard about this, or maybe you heard about it, but you're not very familiar of what is it, what does it cover, and how does it affect your particular organization, right? So I guess that's the reason why you have joined this webinar today, right? So this Cybersecurity Act 2024, right, is basically the law or the enactment by the Malaysian government, by the Malaysian Parliament, right? So over the years, the previous laws was PDPA, the CMA that I mentioned is back from 1998, right? Okay, these are the things that were actually in place, right, to protect data, but they are not comprehensive. They are not over focusing on cybersecurity itself, right? They are kind of focusing on specific industry or specific things like data protection only, not cybersecurity, right? So what Cybersecurity Act 2024, this law comes in place is, it comes together with 4 components, or what they call 4 regulations. So the first one is a period of cybersecurity risk assessment and audit regulation, right? So it actually defines a specific period by how frequent or how long each organization should be actually performing cyber risk assessment and also regulations, right? So there's a particular regulation that comes together with this law. The second one is actually licensing of cybersecurity service providers, right? This is also a regulation that focuses on cybersecurity providers in Malaysia. So before this law came into place, right, there is no one that regulates cybersecurity providers in Malaysia, right? Everyone is, for example, companies like us, like Commission Zebra, we are actually using our own track record, right, and experience, and also our client experience or our customers list as our, so to say, as our as the way to actually show confidence, right? Right, or to prove our capabilities, right, to our customers, right? There is no particular licensing, right? Of course, there are more certifications globally, for example, like CREST, right? But this is global. There's no one specific within Malaysia. So what Cybersecurity Act 2024 does is it actually introduces a regulation to force every cybersecurity provider in Malaysia to register, right? Of course, before you register, they will vet your company. They have a lot of requirement that you need to submit certain documentation and to prove that you have actually the skill, the capability, the resources to undertake services of providing cybersecurity in Malaysia, right? So of course, they will give you the license, right, that you can show to anyone to say that, okay, we have been accredited by the regulator in Malaysia to offer this kind of services. And this is actually renewable, right? So every 1 to 2 years, they will actually renew, whereby you have to go and license again, right, to keep up to date, to make sure that you are also staying up to date to the relevant regulation. So this second part applies specifically to cybersecurity service providers, right? Another part actually is introduces the compound or offenses regulation, right? So these are basically the penalties, right? So what going to be happening if there is non-compliance, right? It's one thing to say that there is a regulation in place, you need people to comply all these things. For example, the first item, introduce period of cybersecurity assessment, right? For example, it says you need to do an assessment every year. Do people actually comply to this or not, right? If you don't comply, what is the penalty? So they specifically give a regulation on this area, right? And then lastly is notification of cybersecurity incident regulation, right? So this fourth component specifies the period and the timeline for notifying cybersecurity incidents. So before this, there is no defined timeline, right? Every organization, they will have their own, depending on the maturity level of the organization, they will have their own guideline or their own specific standard on how to notify cybersecurity incidents, right? They might choose not even to notify at all, right? Because there's no enforcement, there's no law that forces. But what this law comes into place to do is it forces organization to notify, and it gives a defined timeline for notifying all these cybersecurity incidents. So touch wood, if an organization got attacked, they need to follow the specific guidelines. Otherwise, they will be in breach of the government law, right? So focusing on today's topic, we are talking on NCII, right? So I believe a lot of people might not be familiar with it, unless maybe those that are related to NCII, right? So you might be wondering, what is NCII, right? So this is very simple. It's actually the National Critical Information Infrastructure, right? So this is actually one of the things that was introduced by the Cybersecurity Act 2024, right? So it emphasizes a lot about this concept of National Critical Information Infrastructure. It defines very clearly, right, what organizations should be focused and how to focus on cybersecurity. So this was implemented in 2024, right? And it refers to computer systems and assets that are so vital and so critical that if they are affected, right, it will actually impact the whole of Malaysia's national cybersecurity. It might affect the economy, it might affect the public health, the national defense, the foreign policy, right? This is actually something very critical to the whole country, right? Or it's even affecting the government's ability to do their work, whether it's a state government or federal government, right? And this can also affect public and private organizations, right, or entities, right? It's not only government-owned corporations. Even a private institution or private organization can also be listed as an NCII. If what they are doing or their nature of operation is so critical or so vital to the whole country, right, they are categorized as NCII. And also under the Cybersecurity Act 2024, right, they actually specified that these organizational entities, right, they must comply with mandatory security standard and audit, and also incident reporting through NACSA, right? So this Cybersecurity Act also introduced a concept or the organization called NACSA, National Cybersecurity Agency. And this National Cybersecurity Agency is actually the body within the government that is responsible for cybersecurity within the whole of Malaysia. And this actually reports to the higher level all the way directly to the Prime Minister of Malaysia. So you would say now the government has taken cybersecurity very seriously, as they should, right? Because now we understand warfare is not only focusing on physical warfare, but we also have cyber warfare, right? For example, cases of now we have Iran, Israel, we have all this conflict going on globally, right? So cybersecurity is also a very hot button area that we need to make sure is properly protected. Otherwise, then the country itself can get exposed, right? So this National Cybersecurity Agency is actually the body that also license organization like us, Condition Zebra. They give us a certificate or the license to say that we are qualified to offer services in Malaysia, right? And other than that, it also specifies the entities, right? So they very specific, very clearly mention what are those NCII entities, or what are those national critical entities or organization, right? So basically, these are defined as any entity or person, right, within the NCII sectors that actually designated. So they can designate basically anyone, right? It doesn't mean that, for example, you're a private company, you might be thinking, I do not need to worry about this because I'm private company, right? But the government can decide what you're doing, your business nature is so critical, and they will categorize you as NCII. Then you are forced to comply to these laws, right? So as I mentioned, they have basically designated all this, and also they have appointed what they call a sector lead, right? And all these things actually being regulated by NACSA. So the CEO of this NACSA can decide to appoint anyone as a sector lead or any organization as an NCII organization. So what are these sectors, right? You might be thinking, how does it apply to me? So the sectors are very well listed. There are 11 of them. So government, of course, number one, right? So talking about any government institution, whether it's a state level, federal level, right? All the way from the prime minister's level, prime minister department, and all, they are all considered as NCII, right? They are critical, right? Banking and finance, of course, very critical as well. Transportation, so talking about companies, for example, like MRT Corporation, right? All the railway, airports, all the transportation companies, right? They are all considered as national critical because today, if any of them got affected, it can bring down the whole section of the country, right? It's not just affecting only that organization. Then, of course, defense and national security, right? So any organization that participates in defense of the country, right, or the Ministry of Defense, or you are a service provider to the defense sector, then you are also considered as NCII, right? IT and communication. So this is also very easy to understand, right? Information technology, telecommunication, communication, or digital organization, they are all NCII, right? Why? Because these are the digitally exposed assets, right? These are the assets that anyone can try to hack. When someone is trying to basically bring down the whole of Malaysia or trying to actually do something harmful to the country, they will target the digital assets, right? So telecommunications, all the IT platforms, right? The government-owned platforms, right? They are all critical. Healthcare and service providers, right? These are also very critical because these contain confidential information of the individuals or the people within the country. So it can contain information of people from the Prime Minister himself all the way to anyone, right? It could be all their health records. Health records are being exposed to the public, right? Or to the bad guys. And these can actually be very critical. Water, sewage, and waste management, right? These are basically utilities, right? Utility companies, energy as well, right? So for example, like Tenaga Nasional, right? Those Sabah Electricity, Sarawak Energy, right? All those organizations that actually responsible for the energy or, for example, the water and waste management of the country, right? So they also contain, or they have a lot of digital assets within them that are considered critical, right? So for example, a lot of cases of cyber warfare that happened, not even today, this is from even a few years ago, we have had cases whereby countries have had their entire power grid shut down by cyber attack, right? Because all these things are now exposed to the digital surface. Agriculture and plantation, of course, this have to do with food security, right? Especially for a country like Malaysia, whereby it's a huge exporter of agricultural food like palm and all those, right? This has to do with national security as well. So trade, industry, and economy, this one also, all those organization or institution that participate or handle trade for the country or the industry or the economy, right? Science, technology, and innovation. So this one also very self-explanatory, right? So you might be thinking, hey, this looks like it affects everyone, right? But in fact, until you are designated, right? Because like I said earlier, there's a allowance for the National Cybersecurity Agency CEO to appoint or to designate, right, those organizations as NCII. So they are responsible for all doing this analysis to find out what particular organization are considered as NCII, right? But these are the sectors that they have categorized. All right. So what is the expectation basically from this NCII? What do they think that you should do, right? So I'll give you a very high level. Of course, we are not going to go very deep into it, right, for the purpose of time, right? But the first thing is they expect full compliance with this Cybersecurity Act, right? So one, you need to do annual risk assessment, right? What is this annual risk assessment? You need to basically have a checklist of the risk registers within your organization, right, to find out what are the risks that are being exposed and potential risks or potential threats to the organization and to mitigate them, right? So these are done by third-party providers or service providers like Condition Zebra. We do offer this, and a lot of our competitors are available that we also offer this, right? Then there's also biannual audits, right? So this is once every 2 years. So once every 2 years, you are required to do this audits as well, right? So lastly is prompt or immediate incident reporting. So touch wood, if there is any cybersecurity incident or potential incident or threat that happened, you are required to report it immediately or following the timeline. I will share on the timeline shortly in the next coming slides. Right? And there's also PDPA enhancement, right? So as part of this PDPA enhancements, right, from the most recently amended 2024 PDPA, right, it actually requires each organization to appoint a data protection officer or DPO, right? So this DPO is actually responsible to notify promptly about any breaches to ensure there's any cross-border transfer of data is actually protected or safeguarded, right? Because now we are always talking about data sovereignty, right? Every country is trying to protect their data, right? To make sure it doesn't go outside the shores or outside the borders of the country, right? Then proactive cyber resilience, right? So cyber resilience has to do with testing, third-party oversight, and of course, AI and cloud risk management. So a lot of organizations now have started implementing AI into their daily operation or their daily job. They are also offering products that are actually AI-enabled, right? This also comes along with a lot of risk. A lot of organizations, when they expose or they provide this kind of AI-related platforms, it actually allows attackers to perform certain attacks using the AI, because whatever we put on the AI, for example, your ChatGPT or what Google Cloud or Google or what all the different platforms that are out there, right? These are all available on the public internet. So a lot of times people don't have the knowledge to know that what you upload in that platform is now going to be on the public internet. So it's not recommended to upload, for example, your confidential company data. For example, certain sensitive Excel documents might be uploaded by someone into the AI to ask the AI to do analysis, right? So what you have just done, you have simply shared your confidential data to the whole world, right? So there are certain risk assessment and risk management steps that are required to be implemented on your AI or, of course, cloud environment. Third-party risk oversight is also very, very important, because a lot of organizations right now, they are dealing with third parties, right? Almost nobody does business on its own, right? You have to relate to other organization or third party, right? So when you relate to this third party, especially service providers or vendors, you have to make sure that they are also safe, right? So there are tools or platforms that we provide, for example, like security scorecard that can help you to manage this kind of risk that are coming from third parties or your service providers, right? It will help you to mitigate threats that are, for example, coming from supply chain and things like that. Regular testing is very important, because you might have today all your infrastructure, security, and all the technologies in place, but until you test it, you don't really know how safe or how secure is the environment, right? You might have all these things in place, but they might not be properly configured, right? That's why, as part of the regulatory requirement, is we need to do testing. And what is the kind of testing? Is things like penetration testing, vulnerability assessment. These are the kind of testing that are required to be done on a periodic basis, minimum at least once every 2 years. So stricter enforcements are going to come into place, right? So in the past, nobody enforced all these regulations. So now the government is actually moving towards stricter enforcement by issuing fines, compound, right? So the focus on NCII sectors actually is, for example, like those ransomware or AI attacks. There are very well defined penalties for non-compliance. I'll be sharing that also in the coming slides as well. And of course, then there's going to be alignment with global standard for trust and resilience, right? So of course, in today's world, we have to make sure that whatever parties that we are relating to are safe. So we have to make sure that we have alternative products or solutions that are actually giving us resilience, right? We have to make sure that we have certain standards, for example, ISO 27001, ISMS, right? In other regions, they will have focus on SOC 1, SOC 2, right? All these kind of trust criteria as well, right? So we need to align with this globally. Now, talking about the timeline, this is actually a timeline that is defined by the National Cybersecurity Act, right? In 2024, right? They actually specifically mention for cybersecurity incident how soon or how fast we should respond or we should notify, right? So if there's any unauthorized act or activity on a computer or computer system, right, that jeopardizes or provides unauthorized access to the system, right? These is what we define as cybersecurity incident. So upon discovery, immediately you discover this thing, you need to notify the CEO of NACSA and the NCII sector lead electronically, which means basically via email, of any of such incidents, right? Immediately, right? Immediately you discover this. And after that, you notify to the CEO of NACSA. Within 6 hours, you are actually required to submit a detailed information about the incident and NCII entity, right? So this basically applies to those NCII entities or those organizations that are categorized as NCII, right? Whenever something happens, whenever the potential incident or potential data breach happen, you need to immediately notify to the CEO of NACSA via writing in email, all right? And then after that, you need to submit the report. First report within 6 hours, the detailed report. Then within 14 days, you need to submit a supplementary information, including affected systems and threat actors and actions taken, right? So this clearly defines what you need to do, right? So of course, non-compliance to any of these steps will lead to penalty or fines, right? And on an ongoing basis, you need to continuously provide updates as required by the CEO of NACSA, right? So what tells us here is we all need to be aware about this, right? Touch wood, if today any incident happened, all right, in the past, most organizations would try to be private or secretive about it because we don't want our reputation to be affected, right? We don't want this information to go outside. But this actually forces everyone to comply with notification or reporting, right? We cannot hide anymore. Of course, there are certain protection outside within these processes to make sure that this information does not leak out to third party as well, right? So they are all protected information, right? So I don't think NACSA will go and expose you that you have been hacked, right? They will also try to protect you. But it's very important to notify because if you get found out later on that you got attacked and you didn't notify, there are penalties that will follow. I will share more on those later on as well. Right. And one more thing to highlight is the NCII sector lead, right? Because it says we need to notify the CEO of NACSA and the NCII sector lead. So those NCII sector leads, right, are actually the particular either institution or the body, the regulator for your specific industry that are appointed to take care of that industry. So for example, for those financial institutions, the sector lead is going to be Bank Negara Malaysia, right? For those capital markets, they are also going to be sector lead by Security Commission, right? For most entities or most sectors, they do have their appointed sector leads as well. So if you need also further clarification or what, it's actually better to contact your sector lead directly because they are responsible for your whole sector within those 11 sectors that I shared earlier. Okay, so what are the real world cases of non-compliance and what are the failures of the lessons learned, right? So there are recent case studies, right, or recent incidences that have happened already whereby certain organizations did not comply. So without naming specific companies or specific organization, right, there's a case of ransomware that happened right? Recently, as recent as end of last year as well, within Malaysian context, that they actually failed to comply. They are designated NCII, and they have also failed to comply to the regulatory requirement, right? And of course, as I mentioned, there are penalties or fines being imposed, right? But what do we need to worry about? First is ransomware cases, right? Fraud, compromised accounts, right? Which is, for example, the case of also Bursa trading incident, right? Also happened within the financial sector recently, whereby there was an unauthorized trade that was going on those trading platforms, right? Without naming specific organizations, right? So what are the consequences? There's financial losses, reputational damage, regulatory scrutiny. So we all don't want to be on the radar of the regulator, right? Nobody likes to have someone breathing down their neck, right? We want to make sure that we do our business or operations smoothly, right? We don't want to be on the regulator's radar, but if anything happens, such incident happen, you are on the news or you found out on facing cybersecurity threat, of course, the regulator will try to monitor you, right? And constantly you'll be getting requests for updates and reports and all that. So lessons, of course, is to prioritize the basics, back to basics, right? So patching, make sure your systems are patched, right? Make sure you do updates, regular updates. Make sure you train your staff and your users, right? Then you have to test, for example, doing penetration testing, right? Vulnerability assessment, right? BCP testing, right? Incident response testing, right? Simulations of email phishing, right? Voice phishing, all of this needs to be tested, because it's one thing to say that nothing happened, everything is good, but we don't really know in the real sense what is the real picture, right? Until we test it out. And then you have to report promptly. So no harm, no choice. We have to report whenever there's incidents, you have to report following the timeline that I mentioned earlier. And then this is actually built on layered defenses and vigilance, right? So it's one thing to also say that you have done testing, you have done training, you have done all this, but you need to implement layers, right, of defense. So for example, we normally will have perimeter security, for example, firewalls, we will have certain devices or device controls like IDS, IPS, we will also have EDR, XDR, MDR. So you need to have a layered approach to your cybersecurity, and then you need to do regular or constant monitoring, right? This is where MDR also comes in, whereby you will have 24 hours monitoring, right? So those compliance gaps that happen and the penalties that result, right? So of course, a delay or no breach notification. This is actually coming from PDPA, a Cybersecurity Act, right? If let's say you didn't notify when there's a breach, inadequate risk assessment or audit, right? So the law is very clear. It says you need to do risk assessment annually, audit every 2 years, right? If you don't do it, this will lead to regulatory losses or penalties, right? Of course, there's weak access control and unpatched systems, right? This is also very clear, right? If you do not appoint a data protection officer, right, or the DPO, or there's poor third-party management, right? So we don't understand that, yes, it's difficult to manage a lot of third parties, right? You probably have a lot of vendors or suppliers or third party that you deal with, right? You might be thinking it's very hard for you to monitor them, right? Maybe some of them are not critical, or maybe you don't really think that they are vulnerable or they are a vulnerability, but the law or the regulation says that you need to make sure that these third parties are also safe and secured. It's not enough anymore to be safe yourself. You have to make sure the third parties are safe and secure. So there are tools that we provide or platforms, for example, like Security Scorecard, that Condition Zebra provides, that we can actually help you to monitor third-party risk management as well. So insufficient employee training, very, very important, right? Especially when it comes to cybersecurity awareness, right? It's one thing to say we have done training, right? Maybe you do it once a year or once in 2 years or once in 3 years, right? But it's also another different thing to make sure that the training is effective, right? So cybersecurity awareness is something that Condition Zebra also provides, whereby we can actually train your staff or your users on how they can be safe from cyber threats, right? But not only doing the training, we will also do testing or simulation to test out how effective is the training, right? For example, when we do awareness training, maybe a 1 hour or 2 hour session for your staff, we will also follow up. We will do an email phishing to test how effective was the training, right? When real incident happen, are the staff ready to respond to it? Are the staff able to detect real cyber threats or real cybersecurity cases that happen to them? For example, a ransomware or fake email or phishing email, can they detect all these things even though they attend training? then we have to test it to find out. Penalties, as I mentioned, right? A lot of organizations now, they will not take action until there is financial losses, right? So the law or regulation imposes very clear, very strict financial penalties. It can be up to 1 million ringgit, according to PDPA, and by the Cybersecurity Act, it can be 500,000 ringgit plus imprisonment, right? So the government is taking cybersecurity very, very seriously. So what are those possible penalties or offenses, right? Okay. So first thing is failure to implement code of practice, right? So this basically applies to those NCII entities. So according to the NCII entities, right, they have actually a requirement for those entities to implement a code of practice. Normally, they would be notified by the NACSA or the National Cybersecurity Agency to implement all these things, or by their sector lead to implement these code of practices, right? So if, let's say, the organization fails to implement this, there is a fine of 500,000 ringgit, 10 years imprisonment, or both, right? So failure to report cybersecurity incident, right? According to NCII, those focusing on NCII, right, there's 500,000 ringgit fine and 10 years imprisonment, or both, right? So unlicensed cybersecurity service provision. So this applies to organizations like Condition Zebra, whereby we are providing cybersecurity services. So I mentioned in the past, there is no regulation in Malaysia. There is no regulator for this. But now the law is very clear. Anyone providing cybersecurity services in Malaysia needs to have a license from NACSA. If anyone is providing these services without the license from NACSA, they are actually liable to a fine of 500,000 ringgit or 10 years in prison, or both. Right? So also failing to conduct risk assessment or audit, right? This applies to those NCII entities, right? If you are considered as NCII, then you need to make sure this is implemented. It can be as high as 200,000 ringgit fine or 10 years in prison, or both, right? So in the past, it used to be very easy. Okay, most organizations, they decide, do I need to do a pen test every year? Okay, I do this year, next year I don't do, or I do once in 3 years, right? But now, if you are considered as NCII, you need to strictly follow the guideline. Otherwise, your organization can actually face fines or imprisonment of the management as well. All right. So failure to maintain, of course, CSSP record, right? So this is also very, very critical as well, right? So for those that are within the CSSP, they are required to very clearly maintain the records as well, right? So monitoring, very important. So what are those items that you need to implement immediately, or that you need to practice to make sure that you comply with all this regulation, right? So one of the things is multi-factor authentication, right? MFA. Some of them are very easy or very quick wins that you can actually implement. Some of them will require more time and more effort from your side, right? So multi-factor authentication, or MFA, this is very important that we need to implement this. I think most people here will know about MFA, right? But basically, this is just multiple levels of authentication, right? It's no longer enough to have just password, right? In the past, we used to have 2FA, right? 2FA is no longer enough. Now we need to have MFA, right? Encryption. You need to make sure all your data is encrypted. You need to make sure you're using the proper certificates, right? Of course, regular patching and vulnerability scanning, right? Now the law is very clear that you are required to do this within a specified period, all right? So you need to make sure that you do this vulnerability scanning or penetration testing following the stipulated timeline, right? And not only doing the timeline, also to do reporting following the required period in case of any incident. Network segmentation and implementing firewalls as well, right? EDR, right? So in the past, it used to be enough for organization to have just antivirus, right? But now cyber threats have evolved. They are very advanced. It's no longer sufficient to just have endpoint protection or antivirus, right? It's recommended to have EDR, endpoint detection and response. These comes together with more advanced features that can help you to actually do protection and also defensive, right? So it provides detection, response. It can help you to do automated responses as well, whereby even if you are sleeping and touch wood, an incident happens at midnight or something like that, this EDR has capabilities to actually respond, right? Or you can have a SOC team to monitor it, or Security Operations Center to monitor it 24 hours and respond on your behalf, right? Backup, very important. I believe most organizations will have backup, but how effective is your backup is one thing you need to look into. So it's recommended to actually do an assessment or gap analysis, right, for your whole organization to see, are you complying with all these things? Even if you are complying, how effective is the solutions that you have in place, right? And I mentioned earlier, incident reporting, very, very important. And you need to make sure that your response plan is being tested, right? Because it's one thing to have a response document, but it's all theory. If a real thing happened, how effective is that document? How ready is the team to respond to those threats? So that's why we also have advanced threat protection, right? So you need to worry about things like VAPT and also the compliance requirement, right? So why is VAPT or penetration testing important? Of course, it will help you to meet these guidelines by the regulator, right? It will help you to protect the data, to comply with PDPA, and of course, it will evaluate your how effective is your controls or your solutions in place. And of course, you comply to all the necessary requirements of the regulation, right? So vulnerability testing or penetration testing can help you to actually identify those vulnerabilities, right? It can help you to simulate a real cyber attack, right? It can help you to basically comply to these necessary standards or guidelines. For example, Cybersecurity Act, RMIT, ISO 27001, it will help you to provide the evidence. Because when the auditor comes in, it's good for you to say, okay, I have done my assessment, I have done my audit, right? First thing they will ask you is, what is the report? So you need to have that report ready as well, right? And after you have done the report of the testing, you also need to do the fixes or implement the recommendation of the report, right? So another solution that you can consider actually is MDR, right? So this is one of the solutions that we offer at Condition Zero to help you to meet these necessary regulatory compliances, right? So MDR basically is the managed detection and response solution, right? So this is actually a 24 hours, 7 days a week service that is available, monitoring your environment for any potential cyber threat and also have the capability to respond on your behalf, right? So you can actually monitor your application, you can monitor your network, your infrastructure, your servers, firewall, all these devices are actually constantly being monitored. And also the team is ready to there to respond on your behalf. 24 hours, 7 days a week, right? So if you don't have EDR or MDR in place, it's actually recommended to start looking into this because it can help you to meet a lot of the compliance requirements. So for example, reporting, right, is one part that as part of the EDR solution that we provide, we will be providing you compliance-ready reports that you can easily download or generate, and then you can submit to the regulator as and when needed, right? Of course, log retention or log monitoring is also very important. So we actually provide you the platform to actually correlate all these logs and store them effectively, right? Depending on following the regulatory requirements. And incident response. So touch wood, if any incident happens, the team is there to respond on your behalf, even while you're sleeping at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. Right. So this MDR basically provides you 24 hours threat hunting and response. It actually provides you automated detection with expert analysis by our team, ensures timely reporting to comply with the Cybersecurity Act or the PDPA laws, and it also helps you to reduce detection and response time. It's one thing to say that you might have the tools in place, right, to do this detection and response by yourself, but is the team big enough, right, to do this? I believe everyone have a lot of tasks to do. You're probably doing a lot of different tasks on a daily basis, right? So it's good to have a dedicated team like us focusing on this response, and they can respond immediately. So timeliness is very, very important in cybersecurity, right? And then lastly is continuous compliance login, right? So almost all the compliance requirements and the standards will require login, right? Or log recording, right? You need to save or store the logs for a certain number of period. So we are helping you to comply to that using our MDR. And lastly is awareness, right? So awareness, very, very important, right? To help you to reduce human risk or training, to train the first line of defense, or consider your most vulnerable asset within an organization is your human being. Because when it comes to cybersecurity, you might have all the necessary security in place, but if today your staff or your colleague decide to just simply give out the information, all right, or to not be vigilant, right? And they actually go and fall victim to ransomware or all sort of cyber threat, then they can actually weaken the whole defense that you have, right? So cybersecurity also awareness is a regulatory requirement in these days, and it can help you to basically keep your organization safe as well. Right, so you have to basically protect your first line of defense, which is the human being, right? So all these are actually solutions that are available and ready by Conditions Zebra that we can help you to meet the necessary compliance requirement, whether it's the Cybersecurity Act 2024, whether it's the PDPA, ISO 27001, you need to meet SOC 1, SOC 2, all these are actually available from our side. Right? So of course, incident reporting as we wrap up is very critical, especially the Cybersecurity Act focuses a lot or emphasizes a lot about reporting. It's one thing to get hacked, right? It's a different thing to hide it that you've been hacked, right? Because almost all organizations are vulnerable. There's no one that is 100% secure. Even the law or the Cybersecurity Act, it doesn't penalize you for being hacked. It penalizes you for not reporting, okay? So it acknowledges that anybody can be hacked, right? For example, even US government or some of the most advanced organizations in the world, they also get hacked, right? Because threats are coming up daily. Now with AI, it's even making it simpler for hackers to hack organization, right? So there is no penalty for being hacked. The penalty is for not reporting. If you get hacked, you don't report, or incident happen, you don't report, or for negligence, right? Whether, for example, you don't implement the controls or the regulations, and then something happened, then you get double penalty, right? One is you don't comply. Second is you don't comply and maybe you don't report, then it's double penalty, right? So very important, incident response is something that we can actually help you to achieve using our MDR solutions, right? So this brings me to basically the end of today's session. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a Q&A session here. So for anyone who have a question, please feel free to drop it on the chat and then we'll be responding accordingly. Okay, looking at the chat box, we'll go from the question from Jason. All right, thanks for the question. How about education sector? It seems out of the NCII sector. So, Jason, you're correct. It's not explicitly mentioned as an NCII. Education sector is not explicitly mentioned. As I mentioned earlier, the NACSA CEO can actually decide to nominate or to appoint anyone as under NCII. It just depends on how critical is your organization to them, right? Even though it's not within the sector. So for example, it might be a university that is a very prominent one that basically affects the brand or reputation of the country, right? They might decide to just appoint that as an NCII, right? It's even though, like I said, you might be private organization, you might be public listed, you might be what? It actually is still subjective. So there is no guarantee that today you're not in NCII, tomorrow they might decide to appoint you as NCII. So we have another question from Tong. He mentioned, when conducting risk assessment or audit, can this be done internally, or law states it needs to be conducted using external party? Right. So it depends on what kind of audit or risk assessment that you're doing. So for example, penetration testing needs to be done by third party. Right. So it's very clear. Certain risk assessment, you can do it internally. For example, like your third party risk assessment, you can do it also internally. If you're looking at, for example, ISO, right? ISMS audit or ISO audit, it needs to be done by third party. So it really depends what kind of risk assessment or what kind of audit that you like to do, right? Of course, recommended is you outsource it to third party to do it because it gives more confidence to the regulator or to the auditor that this is coming from a third party. The way we look at it is like today you write your exam and you mark your own exam, right? So the auditor or the regulator, they might be looking at it in that way, that why are you marking your own exam? But very clearly, there are certain risk assessment that you can do internally. For example, third-party risk assessment for your suppliers or your vendors, you can do that internally. Oh, okay. There's also a question from Sally. Is manufacturing part of NCII, right? I missed that question earlier. Yeah, so okay. So I think I'll go back to the slide again while we're here, right? So for the purpose of those that missed out earlier, okay. All right. So these are basically the 11 sectors, right? Government, banking, finance, transport, defense or national security, IT, communications, digital, healthcare, water, energy, waste management and agriculture, trade, industry, economy, and science and technology. So like I mentioned earlier, it might not be explicitly mentioned here, but if you look at the way they design it, right? For example, science, technology, and innovation. So you might be today, if you are considered as you are doing innovation, right? Or manufacturing something related to technology or something related to science, right? They can use that to classify you as NCII, right? So even though, yes, they are specifically mentioned, but this can be very expanded, right? They can find a way to make it apply to you, right? So the best practice is basically is either you get a notification officially by the NACSA to say that, or by the sector lead to say that your organization has been appointed or nominated as an NCII, or they might not even officially notify you, right? Because they assume that you will know. So it's actually best practice to make sure that at least the bare minimum, we do the basic compliances, right? Some of it, like I mentioned, are easy win or quick win, all right? Not everything needs to be, you don't need to do everything immediately, right? There are different layers that you can apply, or you can come up with a roadmap on how you want to comply with the Cybersecurity Act. And that is one area that we can help you as Condition Zebra. We are actually offering a free assessment today, whereby for those that are interested, I will be sharing a QR code. You can use that to scan to sign up for the free gap assessment. So we can sit with you to understand your nature of your organization, and we give you like a gap assessment on what you need to do to meet to this NCII. Okay, another question by Nick. Is there any specific way to confirm if the company are considered as NCII entity? If the company not 100% in the sectors listed, it will be easier to discuss with the higher management if we need to. Yes, you're correct. So this is a lot of organizations, even though I do know some of those organizations that they are aware that they fall under NCII, but they have no official notification about it, right? And I do know some others that they receive a letter to notify them about it, right? So this is basically one area that you need to look into the sector lead. You need to reach out to the sector lead to notify them that, okay, this is, we are inquiring to know, are we officially categorized as NCII or not, right? So when I say sector lead, it depends on what sector you are, right? Those sectors are here. For example, if you're a financial institution and you're not sure, then you need to reach out to Bank Negara to confirm if you are explicitly mentioned as NCII or not. Okay, there's also a question by Rishi. Is there specific training for this? Okay, there might be, but Condition Zebra, we don't have a specific training over here on this area, right? So I'm not sure whether there's any training available out there, to be frank. But this is something that we can look into. If let's say you need to have a more focused class to focus on this or to learn about this area, then we might see whether it's possible for us to arrange the training. But at the moment, we don't have a standard, a specific offering for it. Okay, there's another question from Vincent, right? How long does the logs have to be kept? So this also is very subjective. It depends again on what industry or what sector you are playing, right? So for example, if you are under financial sector, Bank Negara have a specific requirements. If you are on the securities industry, right? There's a specific requirement by GTRM, right? If let's say you are not, maybe you are complying to ISO 27001, then there are specific requirements. So I cannot immediately answer you this question without knowing more about your organization. But this is something that maybe we can reach out to you separately after the call to understand more about it. And then we can recommend further. Okay, another question from Wesley. Okay, can we have the recording for this session? Okay. Yeah, so basically this session is being recorded. I will notify my colleague so that after this, we will send you the link for the recording. Okay, okay, Adeline, is there a standard reporting template to notify the CEO of NACSA, or is it same as NCII sector lead notification report? So yes, you're correct. It's same as NCII sector lead notification report. Okay, another question, okay, from Hui as well. You're asking, how can I check my company is under the scope of NCII? So on the screen here, I'm showing the slide again that lists those sectors. So if you are within these sectors, you can already consider yourself as part of NCII. If you are not specifically within these sectors, you might be able to reach out to those sector leads that you think are relevant or related to you to ask, right, officially whether you consider as NCII or not. Okay, so another question from Quack. A company may be within the sectors, but they are small company. Do they still need to be compliant? Yes. So, yeah, unfortunately, we all need to comply, right? It doesn't, the law doesn't specify like based on, okay, whether it's a small company or it's a large company, right? If you are considered or designated officially as an NCII, then you need to comply, right? Maybe one thing is maybe to reach out to your sector lead or your regulator to find out by when do you need to comply. For example, the certain sectors or certain industries or sectors, right? They have particular guidelines, right, for you to follow, right? So you might have to confirm that with your particular sector lead. But I believe eventually they will need everyone within those sectors to also comply. Eventually. So maybe at the moment, maybe due to they don't have enough team or enough staff, they might not be able to follow or go after every single one within the sector, right? But eventually, with time, they might start with the bigger companies, then eventually go down to the smaller players, or depending also on how critical is the organization, right? So it, for example, let me think of, let's say, one very critical department within the government, maybe like the Prime Minister office. It might not be so big, but they are considered critical because of their nature, right? Then they can definitely need to comply. So it's not about size, it's about more on how critical is your operation to the national cybersecurity of the country. Okay, where to check who is the sector lead? Okay, this is also a very good question. It actually depends on what sectors that you are playing. I believe you will have regulators. So for, as a general guide or rule of thumb, if you are within the communications or telecommunications sector, right, your sector lead will be MCMC, right? If you are within financial institutions or, for example, fintech, e-wallet, payment providers, right? All those will fall under, or banks, right? All those will fall under Bank Negara, RMIT. Then those that are under, for example, security industry, right? Securities or capital market, they will all fall under SC, right? There are those that directly fall under NACSA, National Cybersecurity Agency. So you might have to reach out to NACSA to see what who is the appointed lead for your sector. Yes, correct. Okay, there's also another question. Where to check who's the sector lead? Yeah, this question, where to check who's the sector lead, this one you need to refer to NACSA, the National Cybersecurity Agency, to confirm on that. Right. Okay, any scope/level of incident need to report to the CEO? Is there any definition of the incident severity? Where and how can I know who is my sector lead? Okay, yeah. So a lot of questions are actually related to the sector lead, right? So all these actually need to refer to NACSA. So they are there. Okay, thanks, Rosalie. Rosalie, I've actually shared a link here on the chat group. You can refer to it. Actually, you can see more information about that, right? So all these things are defined by NACSA. Okay, the other question is scope/level of incident need to report to the CEO and who is okay. Okay, so I refer back to this slide about the timeline, right? Okay, here. So this is actually the definition of cybersecurity incident, that based on any unauthorized act or activity on a computer or computer system that jeopardize or adversely affects its security, right? So the definition is quite broad, right? You can see if any incident that possibly can harm the system or harm the performance or the security of the system, right? So if, for example, you have a case of ransomware, definitely you need to notify to your CEO or to the higher level, right? Or for example, you have a case of a cyber breach, right? Stolen data, right? Or all this you need to notify. But the definition that they given there formally is here, right here, the first item. Okay. Okay, the question from Tong, following up on the risk assessment / audit question, is a company required to submit the supporting document proof of assessment audit done to the respective sector lead? Yes, definitely. You will need to submit it to the respective sector lead. Yeah, thanks, Jason, again for sharing the link. So there's a link there dropped by Jason on the chat, right, for you to check your respective sector leads as well. Okay, another question. Okay, the incident due to the insider threat also will need to report to CEO. Definitely, definitely. So if insider threat is something that needs to be reported, all right, this is considered as a critical incident, depending on also whatever the insider that has done. For example, insider has stolen data. Definitely, CEO need to know, right? Insider tried to sabotage the company, right? CEO need to be notified, right? So of course, insider threat is considered as critical. It needs to be reported. Okay, another question from Adeline. Can you share the snapshot or exact on the notification of CEO of NAXA and also report within 6 hours? Sorry, I not clear. You want a snapshot of the extract. Okay, extract on the notification of the CEO of NAXA. Okay, this one will be happy to follow up with you again after the webinar. All right, we can deep dive into that, then we can share more information. So I will make a note on that. We'll follow up with you after the webinar. Okay, so another question from Young. Okay, incident and risk assessment or audit report all have to submit to CEO. By right, yes, but the more important about the law is it's not just to submit to the CEO, it's to submit to the sector lead, right? That's more important. It's actually to submit to the sector lead, not just the CEO. He's basically need to go, this report or this assessment report need to be submitted to the sector lead to show that you have done this assessment or the audit. Oh, I think you're referring to the CEO of NAXA, is it? If you're referring to the CEO of NAXA, then yes. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so far, any more questions? Yes, yes, it needs to submit to the CEO of NAXA, correct. Okay, I believe that is the last question that we have for today. If no, okay, there's one more question from Adeline. Incident, yes, but the audit and assessment report, no, right? Okay, so the audit and assessment incident, this timeline I'm sharing here on the screen, this is basically for reporting incidents. It's reporting incidents. But now submitting your audit and assessment, you need to submit it also to your sector lead as well, right? So based on the specific timelines. There are defined timelines, right, that they have actually identified that for example, risk assessment needs to be done on a certain period. I can go back to that slide. Okay. All right. So yeah, there's specific period for cyber risk assessment and audit, right? So there's actually a specific document or regulation that outlines all this information. All right. So we're happy to share more on that as well, right? Because these are information that may be a bit too detailed. That's why we'll not be able to discuss so much for it on this 1 hour webinar. Yes. Okay. One thing I will do, I will share my QR code here. Right, here we go. So there's a QR code on the screen right now. We're actually offering this free consultation of free gap assessment, right? You can just scan this QR code and then you can submit your information. Then we'll be contacting you to arrange the free gap assessment, and then we can discuss further. Okay, thanks, Jason. And also, Young also have a question. Yeah, so there are penalties for basically, let me go back to the slide about the penalties here. All right. So you see, there's very clearly defined penalties. So one is failure to implement the code of practice. All right. So first, if this once you actually designated as NCII, you need to implement this code of practice. It's a specific guideline on that as well, right? And then to answer your specific question is failure to conduct risk assessment or audit, right? So there's a fine of 200,000 ringgit or 10 years in prison. Oh, okay. So Young is asking, okay, submit, not conduct. Yes. So these are semantics, right? So once you conduct it, you have done it, but you need to notify to the sector lead, right? Or to the NAXA that you have done it. You've done your assessment, you've done your audit, right? If let's say today they don't look for you, you're still fine. But who knows? They might do spot check. Whenever they come out, first thing they will ask you, have you done it? Okay, I have done it. Where's the report? Right? So he's wanting to do it. You can do it and keep your report. You wait for them. Whenever they come in, you just show it to them or you submit to them. So far, do we have any more questions? Okay, so again, I go back to the slide for the QR code. For those that would like to have a special session with us, we will actually reach out to you. Just scan the QR code and share and submit your information. We'll contact you to have that session. Let me share that QR code again. Okay, there we go. So I'm sharing the QR code on the screen. You can just scan this QR code, you submit your information, you fill up the form there, then we'll reach out to you to discuss further. But these are absolutely free, there's no cost attached. All right, so if we have no further questions, this brings us to the end of our webinar today. So thank you again, everyone, for spending your afternoon with us and wish you a very wonderful weekend ahead. Thank you so much.